My name is John Fultz. I'm Director of User Interfaces at Wolfram Research, and I'm giving a talk on which I've titled A Meditation on Computable Notebooks and Miscellaneous Thoughts. And I'm talking principally about the future of the Wolfram system front end and the future of notebook technologies at large. Thank you.
So if I wanted to write my own service connection, is there a way?
I mean, is anyone here who has experience working with the service connections? I don't think it's fundamentally hard, but I'm not sure that we have actually talked about the process of that much. So, any other open comments? I mean, I can kind of, bring up a few specific issues, but any other comments that people would like to make? Something you came in here definitely wanting to ask or vent or voice or whatever.
I don't have a solution for this at all, but there you go. Thank you. I often get the sense that people get pulled into open source by wanting to scratch some small itch they have. And oftentimes that's a little bit harder than it could be in Mathematica. The specific example I have is it'd be nice to develop an abstract syntax tree for Mathematica and start linting it and making code quality judgments of my code. But as soon as I have to do that, I have to start worrying about the license manager and the license manager on my friend's machine, and is Adam going to bring up the license manager correctly and stuff like that. So the very small problems where you just need to do one thing and then share it can sometimes be harder than it might otherwise be. And I got nothing, no suggestions for that, but.
Well, I mean, that raises a few problems that some of which I actually put on my list here. Something we thought about is, libraries for as I mentioned, libraries for working with multiple data formats. I mean, actually, I could have written that a little bit better, right?
Sort of to riff on some of that, I was thinking, for some of the things that I've seen demonstrations of, there's lots of data that isn't necessarily installed with a Wolfram install. And if I was publishing papers or something, and I needed to, or trying to support customers on some old version of a product I'd written in Mathematica, and I wanted to be sure that things would stay the same and keep working the same, I would wonder if there was some way to connect to the old version of that data set or something at Wolfram.
That's a good question, and that's, as far as data, that's, I'm fairly certain that's not a promise that at this point in time we can make. I mean, maybe at some point in time we will be able to, but at this point in time I don't think that's the case.
I was just going to comment maybe a little bit on your security audit piece. And I apologize to drag this in a certain direction here, but maybe it's relevant. So, if I wanted to take your software package known as Mathematica and take it to certain places in my customer set, they would expect a whole legion of security checks. And because I don't really own your code, I can't do that, right? Yet there's countless other packages that have been already certified for use in those environments. So there are standard processes, and to some extent you could help yourself as a company by making it better known as to what levels of security checks and audits have you already gone through. Maybe you need to protect those in some way, and so you have to follow a certain process to request the kind of documentation. But it would be helpful if you follow these 3 or 7 steps here, you can get to the document that is a PDF that certifies that this version was, certified in this environment. That kind of thing. Then we could perhaps get further down the road quicker.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask specifically, are we talking military or what domain? Because, for example, I mean, the Air Force is one of our customers, and they will let us know if we fail one of their certification standards.
I'll attempt to partially answer your question. So I was specifically thinking of the case of the U.S. government, right? And the U.S. government is a big thing. And essentially each of the military services, Air Force being one of those, have their own processes. So if you say, let's, for example, hypothetical, let's say that Wolfram version X was certified for the U.S. Air Force as of this date. That is not going to carry like any water with any of the other services, pretty much, right?
Probably looking for a standard certification, and my guess is, to a certain extent, it might not even matter which standard, but that we've done a particular standard. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I mean, U.S. government's a big thing, right? And just DoD is a big thing. But having some way to be able to sort of say, what would perhaps carry water is, hey, this product 2 years ago was certified with one of the military services. And that at least gives the accreditors some positive vibe that this has a chance with some other service, right? They're not going to just sort of reciprocity take the Air Force's certification, right? But they will then perhaps say, okay, this can be done, and you can start moving in that direction. These processes take a long time, I'm here to tell you.
It's sort of a secondhand anecdote, but from what I've heard, some of the most strenuous certification has actually been in the financial industry. I know someone who has customers who won't run anything that they don't have a complete copy of the source code of.
Well, and I think that's a good question. Is this certification, is it how closely is it linked with the concept of open source? I can imagine certifications going both ways. Some certifications that require completely open source, and some certifications applications that don't require it at all.
I think this wasn't necessarily an open source requirement. You can write a contract with them to give them the source code and not have it open. I don't know.
I don't need the mic. Basically, the first level is they want, the concern is that your software is not going to inject a bunch of vulnerabilities in their environment. So they're going to run, a big port scan across your software, and it did or did not open vulnerabilities X, Y, and Z, right? That's the first level, but it's a long conversation.
Does this typo send our queries to Wolfram Alpha, which is somehow being monitored by who knows who, and yeah.
So no, of course that's something that can easily be locked down. We're sensitive to that. You want to say lock down the system so that you don't have random stuff leaving the system to talk to Wolfram servers. That's one switch. So there are obviously certain consequences to that. You may not get desirable updates, for example, but those are the compromises, and I think people are aware of that. So from my perspective, I think there are a couple of areas that that I'm kind of thinking about, just in terms of how I allocate my own time at the company. Thinking about open source stuff. One is thinking about the tooling and the process of just being able to say, I have a project, I want to be able to get it onto GitHub or to whatever platform, and to be able to have a good collaboration environment there with other folks, to get the support that I would expect for other languages, and that means that it shouldn't be a huge barrier if I want other people to be able to build my product and deploy it or whatever. That should not be hard, and I think that we're not fundamentally challenged there, but there are lots of little pain points that we run into. The lack of syntax highlighting, the lack of being able to preview notebooks, the fact that the process for assembling a packlet, which is kind of, it's a convenient unit of deployment, is under-documented. And in some cases, the tools for actually building such a thing are kind of, not standardized at all. So, this is one of the areas that I'm working in, and if that's that's a pain point for you, or you have thoughts or ideas about that, I'd love to hear that. And then the other is just looking at places inside the company where it's like, would it be useful or interesting to take portions of our product and put it out there for people to see, completely transparently? Would that be interesting, or would that be just a waste of time? Because it does consume time, and ultimately, I think it's a difficult proposition to swing that the entire product is going to be out there in some form. It's the nature of running a software business. It's very challenging to do so if your entire product is out there in source form for everyone to use. But there are a lot of portions of our product which I think that I think that we could say, well, why not? Why not have it be out there? And if someone's really interested in looking at it, or maybe even influencing it in some way, that's a thing that could be done. So these are things that I'm thinking about. I think we're not totally constrained strained on time here, but we probably should be wrapping up sooner rather than later. But I'd like to get some remarks from people kind of on that or other things before we finish on here.
Yeah, John, I mean, that last comment is one I'm interested in. I think that there'd be a couple of side effects if much more of the code was exposed. Firstly, users would have examples of best practice out there for their own coding. They'd also be able to take code snippets which would show them how to do things. It would require that code to be well documented and presented there, but which I assume it is internally, though I know not all of it is. But I think that would be an excellent thing. And one of the communities I'm involved with is astronomy and astrophysics, and basically they are totally using Python now. They're 40% use Python, and it's the open source side of it. They got burnt with IDL. Mathematica would be an ideal tool for them. Some of them use it as a side tool, but they all use Python, and I think
in fact, I saw an astronomer giving a very kind of compelling talk at PyCon, talking about, why it was that Python had become a big thing in the astronomy community. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'd echo what you talked about at the top of the list was Git integration. I've seen a huge amount of lift. And I work at a financial data scientist sharing Jupyter notebooks via GitHub. And the fact that it has the renderer available in GitHub became a huge source of lift for just Jupyter adoption across the board. And I know the Zeppelin team's working on something similar for that Apache project. So it might be something that, knowing that people are already versioning their notebooks in Git, being able to then render and or some subset of the notebook and or qualified version of the language be renderable in Git, I think would give it an interesting lift. Certainly, given that there's so much enterprise GitHub internally as well as obviously the GitHub.com.
So actually, that raises a question which I'd be curious to hear about. Is GitHub the only one that matters? I don't know how many people use enterprise GitHub. I was one who picked our own Git solution for use inside the company, and I have to say I dismissed enterprise GitHub pretty quickly because on a cost basis, it's like they're the Rolls Royce in terms of cost, and I wasn't convinced that they were the Rolls Royce in terms of performance, but they definitely were in terms of cost as compared to Atlassian, which were the ones that we chose, and GitLab, who are kind of fairly price competitive with Atlassian. But yeah, so I'm definitely curious to hear. Certainly when we look at the public projects, GitHub is a monster, but are they the only ones that matter? Go ahead.
So I like that question. Why don't we poll the audience on some things? How many of you work at Mathematica, or on Mathematica, or on Alpha? How many have projects on public GitHub? How many use GitHub at work? How many of those are GitHub Enterprise? How many of you use other things? Perforce? What else should I be asking?
So Atlassian, Bitbucket Server, you'll get the Wolfram people there because we do. GitLab. Any GitLab? So you use both? Oh, for personal projects, okay. Sure, yeah. Okay.
How much of the room has used Jupyter and likes it? Oh, I know it's the competition. I'm just.
It has limitations, but
How many of you use? Oh, what is the official name for .wl or .m files? Package files. How many of you have written a packlet? How many of you have given those packets to other people to use?
Okay, so are there demonstrations on the demonstration page that make use of more than just Mathematica? That would be a good example, right? Show me a piece of code that is making use of Mathematica and making use of other stuff.
So, I mean, in the case of demonstrations, I mean, that's an interesting case because, I mean, we have a lot of code out there that is open in some way, but it is I mean, it's constrained. And it's constrained somewhat by the system that we put together, but actually a lot by, we laid down ground rules that demonstrations were all going to, kind of look like this and going to kind of act in this way. Every demonstration is one manipulated, and that's because we said that's what it should be.
My point being,
And the demonstrations, should run on, the current versions of Mathematica or Wolfram Desktop. And if they rely on pulling web data, I mean, I think you can do that. But, the presumption of, something else that's locally installed, I think that would allow demonstration. So, yeah.
hi. So I have very little experience with Python, but I do have experience with R, and I always wonder how much could we open source and maintain the business model, because I look at R and it's kind of terrible. And Sasha would say he would say I'm amazed that people use it. Like the quality of the code is often terrible, and I think there's a business model of like people pay for people to write code that is okay. Like I think that is a business model. So I don't know how good the R code is out there, but I assume that the one that's okay is because someone's getting paid to do it properly. I assume. So I kind of think that's kind of the big the main point of the question. Like if we could have everything open source in the sense that like and still have a business model, I think it would obviously be better. But like how much can we open source? How much do people value open source over quality, for instance? Because people use MATLAB as well, which is not open source and is super expensive for many things. But it works, and people get paid to do that job. And I mean, I don't have the answer. Just like this is what's running through my head, I guess.
Well, let me respond to that. I mean, so when we put stuff in our GitHub account, I have certain criteria for this, and top amongst the criteria are that people should be able, people outside the company, but who have a product for it. So people outside the company should be able to consume this at the source code level. They should be able to build it. They should be able to run it, deploy it. They should know what it is and what it actually
Yeah, just two questions. One is about open data. Are we curating like a Bitcoin transaction data online, which is I think is free? Plus, I think mathematic. Uh, okay. Plus, we have like lots of good statistic package, and I think mathematics is pretty. Wolfram language now is very good at all kinds of financial related like functionalities. Can we like just release some tutorial to show people how to do trading with the Mathematica? Oh, do with the Wolfram language on Bitcoins and other like cryptocurrencies. I think it's now very hot area, like blockchain stuff. So just open this project and encourage people to use Wolfram language as a tool to develop a platform. Yeah. Another one is about the cloud platform. Even though we have like internal cloud, the Wolfram cloud, but I think we can also add packages like open source packages for user to connect Mathematica to AWS or Azure, because we have the Java JLink and the NetLink developed already. So it's maybe an extra layer of APIs to do the automation process from within Wolfram language. Yeah.
So, John, we're about 20 minutes past. I mean, if you want to take more questions, we can. It's up to you.
We'll finish right here.
Sure.
Hand your hand up one more time, and then we'll close.
A kind of small suggestion. When talking about making decisions about what to open source and how and why, one thing that I've seen used very, very compellingly is Wardley mapping. Just to decide like which of the things that we have built are commodities, which of the things we've built can we push our competition around by providing free as open source to help people, which things are our core competencies that we should really keep under lock and key. Good to think about.